we go to the GenG one then? Should we talk about the real fucking meat and potatoes of this playoffs?
Yeah, I think DRX did have some like really great highlight moments. Obviously Zeka in that final game, incredible performance on the Silas, was gifted, that early kill there, but ran with it, did great things, even got that like 4v5 quadra kill at the end after they stole the Ocean Drake to get the Ocean Soul. So really, I think some very strong individual performances. But I think that if you know League of Legends, you're looking at those games, you're thinking, wow, there was a lot wrong here. It was very exciting, but it doesn't give you a lot of hope that DRX is going to go further than semifinals.
Or if EDG had won, you wouldn't feel hopeful either, I don't think. So
no. Yeah, and the reason why is like the flip side of that is the GenG versus Damwon Kia is probably one of the best of fives ever played at Worlds. Like, it was extremely interesting for a variety of reasons. You got to see the tension between these two teams. And we also have been fortunate to see this matchup so many times this year that you kind of knew it was going to be a banger because they played 4 best of 3s. They have all been 2-1s, and some of them have been equally as close as this series, including the most recent best of 3 that they played in summer, which had the crazy like Canyon Karthus game that went to like 45 minutes or whatever, and was barely eked out in a win for GenG that kept their amazing summer season, basically their record-breaking summer season on that pace. Right? If they lose that, then maybe they don't actually hit the same level of dominance. It would be a very different conversation. We also got to see the incredible banger series in the spring playoffs, which of course was the super similar to the Game 5 that we saw here in terms of the jungle invading and like early jungle advantages that were gotten by Canyon. This time on Kane, the last time on Nidalee, and then Peanut having to like think his way out of a very difficult situation as he's like basically imprisoned by Canyon, and then he eventually wins the game, right? So I think this really showed off the strengths of both GenG and Damwon excellently, and we got the same result that we always have, which is now we've seen 2 best of 5s between these two teams, and then 4 best of 3s this year. And they've all come out this way, exactly the same, which is why Wolf and I were saying, like, if you've watched this matchup, the thing about GenG is they can grind out these wins in the end, but it is a bad stylistic matchup for them because Damwon plays them very close and is unpredictable, does have weird picks, is very good at using these weird picks, and GenG is a worse team at realizing enemy win conditions than, say, T1.
I think that Canyon is the only LCK Korean jungler that can compete with Peanut right now in terms of his strengths in pathing and understanding so many jungle matchups. And the Kane pick was really cool, and it was something that obviously Damwon Kia had kept prepared for this best of 5, and it went pretty well. Obviously, Peanut was really forcing Canyon back in that game, despite being camped by him in that final Kane game, which was really cool to watch. So he could delay his transformation. The first time he had it in 10 minutes. Second time, I don't even remember. We stopped counting how many minutes
20 minutes
gone by. It was like 20, 22, something like that. So didn't get as much value. The second time around, they were better prepared for it. They handled it very well, despite Canyon's early leads. And I think that jungle is one of the rules right now that people are not talking about as much because it isn't as flashy in the late game team fights, but setting up for mid game, it's such an important role right now in this meta. And Canyon came out with another niche pick. We've been talking about this all year. On the Monte Wolf show, we're like, all right, wait for Worlds though. Damwon Kia is going to show up. Looking weak in spring. Summer's still not performing as well. But what they were doing that no other LCK team was doing was they were trying new picks. They were trying new strategies. They had bigger, wider champion pools than any other LCK team. And I said, come Worlds, this team's going to have pocket picks. We're going to hit best of 5s. And I only got to play one, unfortunately, because of the bracket draw, which is the one matchup I told everyone, I was like, I don't care what the bracket looks like, as long as it's not GenG versus Damwon Kia in the round of 8. The Korean commentators were screaming and crying when the draw happened because it's the worst possible scenario because we got this in the quarterfinals, not in the semis, not in the finals. Really sad.
On my end, in regards to the series, I think it was very clear that Canyon knew that in order for him to win these games that he needed to overperform, because he was definitely in a lot of these situations squeezing water from stone. I think the idea of how hard Peanut got clapped was maybe a little bit overblown.
Overstated.
Because I looked back at the games the day after, and I think in game one, masterclass. I think Kane could have just killed the Renekton on top. Gragas flashing and not getting anything out of it was a detriment for him later on. Could have killed the Renekton. That invade by dodging the wards was really fucking clever. I have only seen that in solo queue, and that's how it looked like Canyon was playing his placement games in terms of how sweaty he was approaching those games. I think in game two, Seju, very good timing gank on mid, but I think the issue there was that Showmaker just placed his ward way too early, so it ran out, because usually you just place the ward as you go into lane. It would have spotted the gank, and he just died to this gank. And then very clever from Canyon to stick, to just go into the bot bush and kill the Yuumi as they're pushing out, because they showed that Lucian Nami is basically Lucian based. Nami is pretending to freeze, Wukong was there, and then Yuumi fucked up by using her W twice, so he knew the cooldown was there. And getting advantage on a champion that is so shit as Wukong, because the only hope for Wukong is that he gets fed and can dominate, because he can't click camps for shit. Like, he's basically massaging them with this fucking baton that he has. And then I believe in game 3, I think Peanut actually outplayed him. But only because of that circumstance before. Canyon needed to overperform. Peanut went around, caught XP on the bottom tower. He was level 2. And then Canyon thought that he exited and he started to pull the Gromp, and then he died in that game, right? Even though that, of course, this was the game that Damwon won in terms of that jungle minigame that occurs from minute 1, because Canyon was fucking forcing it every game. Peanut had some moments where he did better, in fact. I think there was the game later. In terms of the Kane game, in the game 5, I think Kane was just a shit pick into terms of what the other champions that were showing, but I think he played really fucking good. That was like the biggest dominance, biggest gap in terms of jungle I'd see, because Peanut looked very lost in that game. Game 4, I'm trying to remember what the fuck happened in game 4. That was just the game 4 was the
very one-sided. That was a very one-sided game.
That was also really fucking brilliant from Canyon too. That was when he saw that the ward was placed. The ward ran out. He moved in, and then instead of fighting on the Gromp, he just hid himself and went to the top bush. The enemy only had 3 options. Either he would face check him when he was in the bush behind the Gromp, or the Sejuani would cross into top, or she would queue over the wall and wait for her Q cooldown in the bush. So he just read that fucking perfectly, played around the ward that Seju placed. He knew he could hug the wall, and that level of precision is fucking insanity. Like those, the game 4, game 5, game 1, fucking masterclass. Canyon did his best in game 2, but I think Peanut had that Poppy moment, which was really fucking good for the game, but they ended up losing. So I just wanted to bring that to the table, that it wasn't like just a complete monster fisting in game 5, like all 5 games. There was some moments where Peanut was doing some good moves, like the Seju level 3 gank on mid, and the Peanut move, like the Poppy move as well, with taking XP in bottom side and then defending his own Gromp like that, hiding in the vision.
Yeah, and I think a lot of this too comes from the fact that people just don't understand how GenG plays the game and how stylistically different they are from Damwon. Damwon sets up Canyon so well to succeed, right? And the whole purpose of the way that Damwon plays is they play through their jungle, and they can do it on fringe picks or off-meta like carry picks, and they've done this all year. And you want them to win because they create scenarios where they have a lot of lane pressure and lane dominance, so that Canyon has a lot of freedom to move on the map, right? And this is a strategy that they've continuously utilized so that he can pressure people like Peanut. Now, GenG, if you look at how they were winning all of these games in summer, a lot of it was very early game junglers. It was Peanut, playing Poppy and flashing, behind turrets and shit like this to get Ruler ahead. He will sacrifice a lot himself in order to get his lanes ahead. And also, the later on into the game you go, the weird thing about GenG is that they will make very smart macro calls about sacrificing objectives to continuously farm or to take cross-map turrets. And so what is great about GenG often isn't even shown on the camera in the game, because you're watching a team take Dragon, And Chovy is getting funneled in top lane an immense amount of gold. And this is why I keep bringing up these stats, which is that GenG at points in the summer split were like 4% ahead of lane farm, total lane farm in the game, versus compared to any other team in the world. And they had almost 60% share of jungle camps, which is crazy to think about. They are just so efficient at extracting gold out of the map that you see them sometimes lose, or Peanut sacrifice himself early, and then all of a sudden Ruler and Chovy are just funneled. There's like all the gold is just like shoved down their throat, and then they come back for a critical fight in the mid or the late game, and they don't mind giving up objectives in order to get into this game state. And people don't like that because it's not exciting. Like, you know, it's like you may hate it, but
there's no killing except of the minions.
You may hate it, but this is what peak performance looks like, and they are the best team in the world at doing this. So I think that's why it's frustrating, because fans see the level of dominance that Canyon had in some of these games, but also you have to ask, like, what is the price of this dominance? Like, is Kayn actually super useful in the late game? Did it require a Syndra pick so that they would have mid priority in order to make this work? And what does that look like in the late game? You know, that late game wouldn't even have been close if Canyon hadn't had the epic flank and knock
The
up.
knock-ups, the stun.
Yeah, the
was amazing.
3-man knock up that set up like the Syndra. So like, is that really smart to base your strategy around like making the epic outplay? If you know what I mean. Like, I think it's tough, and this is why people have a lot of frustration when watching GenG, or they prefer Damwon's style of gameplay because it's much flashier, it's much weirder, it's much more compelling. But they're not a super good team when it comes to mid and late game macro and shot calling, and the price of having these really cool early games is often just kind of like sputtering out in the mid and late game.
I do wonder, on a future note, what I think these two teams will potentially be the most negatively impacted by Riot's new jungle changes for 2023, especially like the ones where if you do less damage to the enemy camps and stuff like this, because these are what these two junglers excel at, is actually counter jungling and actually finding advantages in the enemy jungle, finding these pathing answers. So we don't know what else Riot has in store for 2023. They might take away even more stuff from the jungle, which would be really sad, because I think that these two players' intelligence with their role is so well expressed right now in this meta. I think got even better in the durability patch. So hopefully they don't get nerfed to the ground next year, because I would really hate to see that.
I wanted to add as well in regards to the series, like Damwon in both game 1 and 2, they had winning positions. Like after the game 1, like a lot of the focus.
They should have won game 2 for sure.
Like game 1, they dove the bottom tower to use the Herald when they didn't need to, and then they heavily misplayed the fight in preparation for, I believe, what was the third Drake. They had the Gragas ult, the Kayn W, Nami ult, anything to cancel the misfortune, but they played that fight very, very poorly, which is, of course, in a game that sometimes you misplay fights. I'm not pointing this, but I felt like the first 4 games that we saw, I felt like overall Damwon played better. And sometimes you lose games because of reasons, but I felt like Damwon was definitely looking like the better team after the first 4 games that I saw. Coming into the game 5, they really squeezed the jungle pool, and they targeted really good bans, I think, with the removing the cartels, because I think that's what they were aiming for. And they picked Kayn in a spot which was really, really rough for him, and Syndra pick was also like very, very bad, generally speaking, and GenG could just hold out long enough for everything else to be relevant. I remember that game as well. Victor was very far ahead and managed to pick up some kills, and that's not something that you really want to happen to any Victor, and especially Chovy on Victor that is not going to miss a single CS in the game. But I felt like Damwon played quite good, and I can understand. The first game they opened up the Yuumi because they didn't want to put their bot in a situation where they are tested on their depth. I get that, and I think in the second game, I think their intention, I could only read it in 2 ways. that they are either working with the assumption that the enemy is going to ban Yuumi, and they prepare the Lucian Nami again with the Aphelios ban. And then I think also there's another layer to it where I think they didn't have prepared to play any other AD with Yuumi besides Sivir. And the moment Sivir ban
That's
came,
what I said earlier. Yeah, like they didn't expect the MF for sure.
They got completely schmurdered because we were scared of this situation too. Legit, we when we were preparing our draft, I was like, boys, if the enemy team doesn't ban Yuumi 1-2, we are banning Yuumi on 3. That was our situation on blue side, because on blue side it's a lot trickier to find the right answers into the champions that you want to pair with Yuumi, generally speaking, right? I feel like our game against EDG, they didn't have good matches, good picks with Yuumi at all. And if we played Sandal, probably the game would be better. But the T1 game, they had all these fucking Silas and the Yon and the Ninja picks and so forth. They found them in a really deep way on red side when they were blue side. But all in all, I think that game, they just got completely fucked by the Civi ban. And I don't think they wanted to play Yuumi Misfortune at all. And they're like, what the fuck do we do? I guess we pick Lucian. What the fuck? Because if the enemy team decides to not pick Yuumi 1-2 and they decide to pick Lucian and you don't want to pick Yuumi, then you giga fucked because you banned the Ferries yourself. So I think they just got hit with a right hook on stage with the Sivir ban.
Should we talk about the semis?
Well, hold on. I think to your point too about like Dom1 winning. People will look at game 2, but if Peanut doesn't steal that Baron, like they basically ended up in a very fortunate situation where Peanut stole the Baron, neither Doran nor Chovy died, which meant that they have this extremely strong 1-3-1 split push with a Baron buff all of a sudden with Yone and Camille, and there's no way to answer both of those side lanes for Damwon, right? If Peanut doesn't steal that Baron, and Damwon can like force them to group around objectives, that game probably is won by Damwon. Like, and even if GenG gets that Baron, but either the Camille or the Yone die, I'm not sure they finished that game because it was such a, like, the compositions just wanted to do two very different things. So whoever got Baron was going to be able to force their will upon the other team, and I think that team wins. And the fact that I believe it was Peanut who died during that steal,
yeah.
But the fact that Ruler and Lehens also still had Baron, so you could pressure all three lanes at the same time. That's when like the gold lead started to like balloon out of control for GenG. But that game was really on the knife's edge.
I remember that fucking game because I felt so sorry for Canyon. Like, I remember, like, they are doing Nash, they have Azir Gragas, they are not pushing the fucking Sejuani away, they see her the entire time, they refuse to burn their flashes to secure this Nash, and then later there was this fight where Lucian both had stopwatch and flash and didn't use any of them on the Yon ult, so you just got one shot in a fight that was completely over and winning. It was truly like heartbreak because it always seemed like, oh, this is Canyon's effort. Holy shit, this is so insane. And then God bless Showmaker had his back with the Swain game. That was a fucking thing of beauty too. That was probably the best Swain I've ever seen ever. Like, that was the best Swain performance ever. Thought he would have a hard time into Lucian Nami, but he just punished whatever Chovy, what the fuck he was trying to do at the Raptor camp.
Showmaker might be like an MVP candidate for this tournament if he had advanced, right? Like, I mean, the guy has had insane performances after really underperforming all year long. That Swain game was actually crazy.
I mean, that was another game where I was like, is the Swain even fucking playable? Because he's playing it into Maokai, Poppy, and Azir. It's like, how the fuck does this guy across all those three ults even get in range? Right? He's going to get bounced out by Azir ult. He's going to get rooted by Maokai ult. He's going to get ejected from combat by Poppy ult because he just stands in the front. You got Nami wave as well. Like, I was like, how the fuck is this guy going to play League of Legends in this game? And he found a way. He found
very good positioning, very good pulls with never moves.
Want to see more cool, funny, interesting clips based on topics from my content? Well, subscribe to this channel then, or, you know, be a pleb and don't.